just, there you go. Well, we are recording and we are going to start our show of Rosato and me.
Yes.
You gotta, obviously, this is me, Ardina Seward with Ken Rosato. And our guest today is Jess Coleman, who is a candidate for New York City City Council person in District 1 of New York City. And that district, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jess, that district is Tribeca, Battery Park, and portions of the Lower East Side and portions of Chinatown, correct?
That's right. We also got to add in Financial District and Soho as well. It's
That's
roughly south of Houston.
okay, the big
That's what we're
bucks,
dealing with.
the big
Yes.
bucks portion. Okay, you're running against an incumbent, Chris Marte, and this is your first try at running for city council person. So I'm gonna be kind of blunt. What do you got that he doesn't?
Solutions, and a desire to be active in government. I mean, um, you know, I don't have to tell you guys the crises that we are facing throughout this city, and unfortunately, Lower Manhattan has kind of become a bit of a poster boy of all those crises. We are dead last in affordable housing production down here. At the same time, we are first in pedestrian deaths and vacant storefronts. I mean, we're setting records here. Um, and the thing is that we have the benefit of living in 2025. We have the benefit of seeing what other cities have done with similar crises that they've faced, and we know what to do. We know that we need to get rid of restrictive and exclusionary zoning laws that have lead to skyrocketing rents. They foster segregation. We know that we have to invest in things like open streets and pedestrian plazas, which are a boon for local businesses. We know how to address our mental health crisis and the public safety issues that we are dealing with connecting people with transitional and supportive housing. We know what to do. But unfortunately, throughout this city and particularly here in Lower Manhattan, we're languishing with leaders who just kind of block bold ideas, say no to everything. And as a result of it, we have this situation. We're seeing it all across the country where people don't trust government. People are cynical. They don't believe that any solutions are coming their way. And I refuse to accept that. I want a government that's active, that people have faith in, that people believe in. That's sort of the heart of progressivism and what we should be fighting for. So I'm doing this to sort of restore some faith in progressive governance and bring some solutions.
Now, do you find though that this is probably a problem in New York City because it is a strict one-party town? I mean, when you only have
Mm,
one party, now you're dealing with the party bosses as opposed to what is, if you're truly progressive, you want the people to be able to pick and make the choices. It's somebody like you who you're a like, I mean, to look at your resume, it reads the perfect person to run for council. You're an attorney, you're a husband, you are from Manhattan your whole life, you're born and raised in Manhattan, you got pets, you live it, you put your money where your mouth is. No, seriously, you because I
I
look,
appreciate that. Did your
I am
research.
I'm from the well, that's what I do. I'm a journalist, right? I'm from the outside. I've always lived within 30 minutes of Manhattan and commuted in for grammar school, high school, college, work. All right. I did that. I'm 57. I've done that my whole life. I always looked at all of my friends who are lifelong Manhattanites, and many of them are a little blasé about what they
Mm,
have. They don't realize the treasure that they have around them. You clearly do realize that. The sad part is when you deal with one party politics, whether it is left or right, you end up
yeah.
with one party boss at the top who dictates who does what, who could run, and nothing else gets done. It literally ends up in stagnation.
Yeah, we've been plagued by one party rule in this city, and I'm saying that as staunch a Democrat as a progressive as there is. But um, we've had a situation where it's kind of demobilized people, where they kind of just sit tight and they know, that there's not going to be very competitive elections. There's not going to be high engagement elections. I mean, down here in Lower Manhattan, last election was 7% turnout with a median voting age, I think, of 63. So people just don't participate. And yeah, I think part of that is the fact that there's been one party rule, and we just really haven't been held accountable in New York City as progressives. And that's kind of, counter to the concept of democracy. We're supposed to be held accountable.
By the way, when I speak disparagingly of one party rule. I'm not saying you should have a strong. I look. I stand to the right politically. That would never work in Manhattan. It would. I know that. I get that. Okay. But like I could see a Manhattan, and you may or may not agree. Feel free one way or the other, where you have the two parties be Democrat and Green, or Democrat, even Libertarian. I don't see conservatives ever and I don't see it ever working either in Manhattan. Just by virtue of this many people, you have to have a more socialized system in that kind of dense population to work. It just otherwise organization and order. You can't rely necessarily on the market to just do everything. You know what I'm saying? So I acknowledge that, and I'm trying to be as honest as possible here. But I'm shocked that at this stage we don't have a strong Green Party in New York, a really, really strong, vibrant Green Party, say, or something slightly left of the standardized Democrat Party to take on the behemoth that is the Democrat machine.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point. But it what's happened though is that, you're saying that conservatism won't work here in Manhattan. I agree with you to an extent. But one thing I've noticed, being on the community board now, running for office, being, active in local politics, a lot of what goes on in local politics and a lot of the things that are said by our local leaders, they're not too far off from some of the things you see coming out of the mouths of Republican politicians all across this country. I mean, look at where we are on housing. Where my local council member was the only member to vote against City of Yes, which is a pretty modest plan to get rid of some of the most restrictive zoning laws that we have in the city to increase housing production. And some of the talking points that are put out there about how we don't have an affordable housing a housing crisis, just an affordable housing crisis. That housing isn't subject to the laws of supply and demand. I mean, these are things that you can map onto politics differently, but at the end of the day, Project 2025 is all about keeping restrictive zoning laws in place. So I think I don't know so much if people really think about politics in terms of left and right so cleanly anymore. There's a lot of wiggle room in there, and I think really the defining line these days is not so much left and right, but whether people just believe that their government can bring them solutions, or they should just throw up their hands and kind of throw it to the wolves.
I agree with you, Jess, because many traditional conservatives would look at a Donald Trump and say he's no conservative. I mean, there are
Right.
many things. Tariffs, perfect example. That's not what a traditional conservative would do. It's more Trump has kind of remolded his own brand, and
Hmm.
that's why you have people who are lifelong Democrats who've gone to Trump, and then you have people who have never voted go to Trump because he kind of is their clarion call. Whether you could hate him or love him, but he's their clarion call, he's their brand. And you have a lot of those people, and I think the Republican Party is latched on thinking, oh, for the next 50 years, this country is going to be Republican. No, it's not. This
Mm,
country voted for Trump. They didn't vote for the Republican Party. Case in
yeah.
point, just take a look at Congress. Why didn't all the House seats go to the Republicans? Why isn't the Senate 70-30? It's because this country they literally latched onto a brand, which could be very dangerous too, because obviously that's when a brand could dictate whatever it wants. And if you're sold on the brand, you blindly follow. And that could be a very, very dangerous thing too. So it's interesting to see. But I agree with you. And I would like, in fact, I'm getting off too much here on the generics. Let's go more into the specifics. Um, if you were elected to the New York City Council, do you feel you could rally enough other council members to your side on many of the issues you're talking about? Because these are really valid issues specifically for your neighborhood, and that's your job, to be in the microcosm of the city council to represent your district.
I do, and honestly, I think that the incumbent in our district has been kind of out of step with the Democrats in the council, at least on many issues. So a lot of it is kind of, particularly on housing, a lot of it is kind of just getting us more in line with where we are citywide and where we need to be going, and not just being a barrier to progress, which is really the issue that we're dealing with right now in Lower Manhattan with our council member. Um, yeah, I mean, look, I'm focused on really concrete things. I think that this is what we need to be doing as Democrats is getting back to the basics and what are the very concrete things that we can do in people's neighborhoods that they can see on their street, feel in their commute, feel in their pocketbook. What are the things that we can do to make their everyday lives better? So, I'm not talking about huge, lofty goals necessarily. I'm talking about simple things. more open streets, more pedestrian plazas. Let's get some of those vacant storefronts off the streets. Let's do things like universal daylighting to make our streets safer so that we don't have people dodging cars on their way to work. I mean, let's do the things that we know work that are very basic. And we can also talk about the big ideas. Let's build hundreds of thousands of new homes to fix this housing market. But let's get back to basics and just not block progress on the things that we know work.
But speaking of basics, I mean, there are a lot of pragmatic concerns. You want to build affordable housing, but that comes along with an improved infrastructure. You want to improve you want to create affordable housing in Lower Manhattan, which parts of it are almost at sea level and subject to a lot of flooding.
Mhm.
Plus, now you're in the crosshairs of a president who wants to roll back congestion pricing. Not roll back,
Yeah.
just do away with congestion pricing. So you have a lot of headwinds coming at you. Let's say if you do get elected as city council president, how are you going to deal with that? Yesterday, the Department of Justice stated that they are going to cease federal funding to sanctuary cities across the country. So with all of these grandiose plans that you want to have, where's the money going to come from? How is that going to get done?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, there are going to be issues along the way. I mean, we lost a big election, and there's going to be pain in the next 4 years. I don't sell people on any sort of utopian vision of what's going to happen. But you mentioned congestion pricing, and I think that's a perfect example of where Democratic leaders in this city, and we can talk specifically my council member who was actually against it. The incumbent in Lower Manhattan was against congestion pricing. They kind of ran away from it for a long time and didn't want to talk about it because they thought it was unpopular. And we're talking about that one party rule. They thought they can just kind of hide in the corner and no one would bother them about it. And then what happened is the right wing voices kind of filled the atmosphere. And then they ended up kind of winning the day. So I think a lot of it, you're right, there are going to be headwinds, and we don't have the formal power that we need in Congress. A lot of it is let's stand up for what we believe in and stop kind of cowering in fear and standing in the background. Let's be bold about our vision. Let's call out the federal government when they do things that are egregious, like, if they want to pull funding from sanctuary cities, well, people are going to feel that immediately, and there are going to be consequences for that politically. So let's call it out. Let's stand up for our values and not just kind of stand in the corner and protect ourselves because we're afraid of getting into this fight.
This way. Go ahead, Ardina. I'm sorry, please.
But even and again, I'm not trying to belabor the point, but even when it comes to the issue of standing up for your values,
Hmm.
it almost seems as though the avenues of protest are narrowing, except for legal recourse. And legal recourse takes a long time to wind its way through the courts,
Yeah.
while the implementation of the Trump agenda continues to march forward. That sounds like a convoluted question. But it appears at this point that anything is going to be done, anything is going to be challenged, is going to have to be challenged in the courts. You're a lawyer, so you know what to do. But
Well,
the whole progressive agenda is being really challenged to the max at this point. So what do you have? What do you have to throw against the adversaries that are coming against it?
yeah. Well, I mean, look, there's a lot we could do here in New York City because we do have power here. We already have those sanctuary city laws. We already have a lot of protections here.
Which is
But
being eradicated, which
yeah,
is
right.
being nuked as we speak.
Yeah, and you're right. They're gonna come after us. And look, I mean, again, there are going to be things that we can't stop, right? Besides putting ourselves out there and just fighting, whether it's protesting, whether it's, being just as oppositional as we possibly can. And I don't mean to sound flip about it, but we as Democrats have kind of gotten away from that and we've kind of convinced ourselves that if we don't have formal power, if we can't work through our institutions, well, there's nothing we can really do. But it's not true. We have to get back to doing the work of actual politics, which is being oppositional. Let's win an election in 2 years. Let's get Congress back. Let's work on persuading people. Just because Trump won an election doesn't mean that everyone in this country is going to be happy with everything that he's doing. Let's be oppositional and convince people that this is wrong. Let's create pressure and let's go win an election in 2 years. And look, it doesn't mean we're going to fix everything. It doesn't mean that we're going to win every single fight, but that's what we have to do. We have to get back to the work of actual politics.
Yes, one of the things that I noticed though with the Democratic Party is sometimes the party, to make a point, shoots itself in the foot
Oh
and
man, yeah.
just okay, and to the point that it's like you have to choose the hill to stand on. You have to choose what, pick your battles. And when you look at situations like, look, I get what, sanctuary cities were back. The idea of a sanctuary city was backed by Republican mayors too back in the day. Because for those who don't recall, and you're a little younger than me, just not for anything, you are okay. I mean, I know I look 21, but it is what it is. Back in the day, that chuckle makes me nervous. Back in the day, sanctuary cities came about because you did have a number of people who were here without legality, if you will, from a federal perspective. And what would happen is if there were crimes that were committed in their neighborhoods, and police would go to the neighborhoods to find out, do you know who this
Right.
person is, et cetera. They would rightfully fear that the police would come and report them as being here illegally, and they would get deported. So the concept of sanctuary cities came about where we said, oh, look, here's the plan. We are not going to deport you just for living in the neighborhood. You are our resident. We're not coming. The feds want to do that. That's their business, but we're not going to report you. They have now they being the Democrats, you've taken it to the point that you have somebody who has 17 murders, 26 rapes, pedophilia, and it's like, that the person is here illegally, but you refuse to double check that they're here illegally. You have them in prison. There is a detainer from the feds to come and get them the hell out of the city of New York to rid us all of this nemesis. But yet, nope, we refuse to share with ICE. That's when you don't. This is when the rest of America looks at New York and says, what the hell is wrong with you people? Literally. And this is why you get somebody outside of New York who says, you're a bunch of freaks. You don't understand. You live in a bubble, a microcosm of Manhattan, and you refuse to open your eyes and see what is obvious. Can there be a happy medium? Can Manhattanites wake up and say, okay, if the person is here illegally, we're not going to deport them. We're not going to report them, et cetera. But if you commit a crime, babe, all bets are the hell off. I'm going to drop a dime on you before I walk out of the room and get you out of my city. You're an attorney. You live in this city. This is your city. Don't you want a rapist, pedophile, murder? Don't you want him gone?
Yes, and look, I think that if you asked, every Democrat in elected office in New York City, I think you'd have the vast, vast majority of them say yes, that's a line that is reasonable to draw. I think what you're getting at there is a bigger problem that we have on the left, which is that people don't buy what we're selling, right? They think that we are a party of virtue signalers who don't really mean what they say, who don't really believe in rules, who just let people get away with things. And that's allowed this message to proliferate, particularly on immigration, which the right has taken advantage of. So, more broadly, I think that, again, like I was saying before, we need to get back to restoring trust where people believe what we're saying. And I think there's a lot of anger right now being directed at immigrants that isn't necessarily warranted at all, because people are just generally angry with the system and don't believe that it's working for them. And I think
But hang on, let me pause you, Sean.
Yeah,
Forgive me
go
for
for it.
stepping on you, Jess.
Please.
One thing, my family were immigrants, like I'm sure maybe yours and many others.
Yeah.
But this is the way my family immigrated. They had to go from Italy to Argentina, wait 17 years, work their fingers to the bone, and legally commute to the United States from Argentina, because back then, the policy of the United States was to increase migration from South America. There was an unlimited number of people allowed in. But anywhere else, during the 30s, 40s, 50s, if you wanted to come in from Europe, the annual number was 50,000, and that was it. So to come here, that's the way they had to do it. They did it legally. And I think it's an insult, a vile insult to people. And by the way, a majority in the polls who come from Latin American countries agree with this. Don't conflate the people who came here legally by
Right.
the millions with illegal migrants, because they take offense. And I think this is where the Democrats shot themselves in the foot. For years, you have counted on Hispanics and blacks as being one solid voting bloc. And this time out, you lost more than half Hispanics and a quarter of between 15 and 20% of all blacks. And primarily that's the reason. You have migrants who came here legally who say, do not mix me up with that guy who is a gangster from Venezuela in many cases, because they opened their prisons. I remember when I was at Channel 7, I remember sitting on the set and having this conversation with a person who also, her family, I'm probably giving it away, Ardina will figure out who I'm talking about. Her family came from South America as well. And when I said, listen, there are two studies I just read saying that Venezuela just opened its prisons and let thousands of prisoners up, I was told that I was being somehow prejudicial. I said, I'm not
Yeah.
being prejudicial. I listen to Watto. I listen to the radio. They're talking about it. They call up the station and say, yeah, I'm a crook from Venezuela. I just got here. So this isn't, you have to, again, open the eyes. You sound like a very pragmatic person. Praise God. And it would be, I just think that the city council could use, I'm like endorsing here, the city council
Oh,
needs
please.
open minds and fresh air. And I just wish that more people on the council could have their minds open.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But yes, no, I think you're right, and I think what you're getting at is that people like rules, right? People want people to follow the rules, and they value hard work, and they see people who they feel like are getting giveaways, right? That they're coming here illegally, they're getting, debit cards from the city to pay for their food, and they feel like people are getting giveaways, and by even though they're knowingly breaking the law. So, that's you know, Democrats respond to that and they say, rightfully, right? And I'm sure you know this too, that policy wise, like we've been put in an impossible situation with our immigration system because, right, there essentially is no legal pathway to become a citizen anymore. It's virtually impossible, right? So then we have people come to the border and they just claim asylum, and then because we also don't have enough immigration judges, they just never have to go to a hearing and we release them into the country, and you're essentially here illegally, and there's nothing that's done about it, right? So that's the system that we have because it's a breakdown of the system, right? That we don't have actual rules to become a citizen legally. But that doesn't mean that we can't still talk about it differently, right? And if you go back to how, President Obama was talking about immigration not very long ago, he talked aspirationally about a system where, if you want to come to this country, we're happy to have you. You want to contribute to your community, you want to work, excellent. But you're gonna get in line. You're gonna come here. You're gonna do your paperwork, take your test, and you're gonna become a legal citizen. There's gonna be a pathway for you to do it in a reasonable amount of time. That's a message that I think is a supermajority message that people can get behind. But Democrats, unfortunately, we've become, we've gotten away from that message and become a little bit more about, virtue and what's the right thing to do, and lost that sort of aspirational message that we used to have about how things should be, not just sort of catering to the way that things are. So I think that's where we have to go. I don't think this is as big a change as people think it is. I think we have the right values. We just have to communicate better what we're advocating for and what our aspirations are to the extent that we still have them.
But how do you reassure people that the equity is being distributed equally? Because there's a big hue and cry that native-born people are not getting the same funding, the same consideration that undocumented people are getting. I mean, the case in point is if you are an undocumented person, you are eligible for affordable housing. You are also eligible for the housing projects as long as one person in your family unit has a green card or who has the right to live here legally. So that means that anybody who's a native-born person gets thrown out of that slot, because now an undocumented family, as long as that one member can be a baby that was born 2 weeks after the mother gets here. They are now eligible for the affordable housing lottery. So how does that square?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that that's exactly what the problem is, right? The core of that, which is that when when people feel like they're not being taken care of, when the system's not working for them, um, really all bets are off, right? We can't be the party of we're going to take care of one group of people and just not care about the needs of everyone else, right? That's just not going to work. And I think what you're saying there is really the core of the issue is that people feel like this system isn't working for them. So every time that they see the system working for, someone who might have come here illegally and didn't follow the rules the way that they have their whole life, they're gonna lash out against that system. And I understand that. I really do, and that's why one of my core messages in this whole campaign is how can we get back to making this system work for you, right? Not for someone else, right? We have to stop as Democrats asking people to just simply do the right thing. We have to get back to talking about how is this system going to work for you? And that's why housing is central to my campaign, public safety, revitalizing your neighborhood. These are the things that people are just see around them, just the chaos and things breaking down, the fact that they can't find an apartment with a second bedroom for less than $6,000 a month. These are the things that lead people to believe that this just isn't working for me. It's just not working for me. So why am I going to vote for you? Why am I going to believe you when you say that, we can afford to fund all these programs for migrants and whatnot? I just don't believe you. This isn't working for me. And until we can solve that problem, I don't think anything else really matters.
One of the things looking at New York City, I would, if it were not New York City, you'd say, well, part of the problem is organic versus inorganic bringing up of, say, public housing. The organic would be let the local investor pool together some money, maybe mortgage their house, build one or two houses, and you could rent one out for affordable
Mm,
income, and et cetera, et cetera. In Manhattan, the reality is you are either a trillionaire and you own tons of real estate, or you're scraping to get by. It's
yeah.
like there is no middle class. Manhattan is the only place on the planet where if you make 200,000 a year, you're a pauper. And
Right.
really, right? Any
Yeah.
literally, you make 30,000 in 99% of the countries on this planet, and they look at you as, wow, he's living
Yeah.
high. And in Manhattan, you wouldn't even be the shoe shine guy on the street if you're making that kind of money. And it's just I think that's part of the problem. And that's where when I say the true conservatism in its form, I think would work in most places. I really do. Most places that are not urban dense, like a Manhattan, or like maybe a Detroit or something like that. And that's where I think there's got to be that blend of socialism and capitalism to make it work because of those circumstances. So it comes down to do we have some kind of a hybrid maybe that we could come up with? Like maybe the city offers financial guarantees for smaller groups of, say, minority investors to start their own real estate company that could then build housing, half of which would go to lower and middle income people. So now you have a little combination of capitalism along with socialism mixed together in a hybrid that would probably work in Manhattan.
Yeah, I mean, you're really describing kind of what already exists, right? Like our housing market is very much mixed. We have public housing, we have rent stabilized housing, we have market rate housing. I'm sitting right now in my apartment. I live in a mixed income building that was 80/20 under the 421A program. We have new tax incentives that recently passed in the state legislature that are going to incentivize creation of 75 market rate, 25% affordable housing. It's a model that works, like you're describing. It does work. And we've seen it in places like, Montgomery County and in Maryland that kind of pioneered the social housing model and the mixed income housing model. It's really worked. But the problem that we have is that we just don't build enough of it, and the crux of it is that we have these absurdly restrictive zoning laws across the city. We still have things like parking mandates and single family zoning that just prohibit people from building. And that's really the core of the problem. And if we get rid of that, if we can just allow uh, people to meet the demand that's there, we'll be okay. We'll be okay. But we don't have that right now. So
You know,
that's where we need to get.
and on that note, I'm getting what looks like the 5-minute warning of running out of time here. So, I want to thank you very much, Jess. We have a few more minutes where we can wrap it up. I want to thank you for being a guest and also a candidate. People can go to your website, Jess Coleman, for New York City Council, District 1. And also, I want to put a plug in for my buddy here, Ken Rosato, who is anchoring on a cable station. It's actually online. It's ONNJ, which stands for On New Jersey. Ken anchors in the morning from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m.
Correct.
Ken, which is it's a little early for everybody, but you can still check it out online and you can see him talking about politics and everything else that is important to New Jersey. Ken, I'm going to let you have a last word and wrap it up, bud.
Well, thank you. And Ardina and I worked together at Channel 7 for a whole bunch of years. I know, the fact that Ardina and I are only in our mid-20s is kind of shocking to many people, but no, I appreciate you checking that out. But I just speaking to Jess and the amount of time that we have, it is just refreshing to hear somebody who is open-minded, but as our friend Bill Evans, who was our weather guy at Channel 7 for years, would say, once you get into office, they'll slap that optimism right off your face, Jess. Don't let it happen. Don't let it. If you get elected, stay with that great open mind and those brilliant ideas. And I think the city will have a very bright future. The problem is you have too many people of whatever party, and it's really not about party. It's about will and not wanting to move forward. Or I don't mean to suggest, but maybe too many people getting too much influence, if you know what I'm talking about. And that has got to stop. I mean, you represent the future of the city. So best of luck to you. And thanks for joining us today.
I really appreciate it. This has been fun. Let's do it again sometime. And let's keep that optimism alive. We have no choice.
You bet.
Yeah. All right, folks, over and out.